G'day everyone, welcome to Lubrication Experts. I've got a really exciting interview here today. Today we've got Tal Wagstaff, who's the founder of Redlist. If you've not come across them and their software platform just yet, well, we'll do a bit of an introduction and you can get an idea for what they do. I think they're doing some really good work in the industry, so I'm excited to explore that. Maybe just to start off, could you please introduce both yourself as well as the business, as well as maybe some of the industries that you guys tend to play in?
Yeah, would love to. Thanks, Ray, for having me on. We're excited to be on your channel, and watching your videos. They all apply to the world we live in as well. So really excited to be here. I guess I'll start with the company, just to give a real quick high-level intro to Redlist. Redlist is a tech company. We build apps for maintenance teams, lubrication teams, so lubrication management software, and we have some safety modules as well. We've been doing it since about 2014. For myself, I'm one of the founders. My story, I guess, with lubrication and maintenance dates back to some humble beginnings. One of my favorite pictures of my childhood, Rafe, is it's me and my older brother. I'm like 5 in the picture. He's 7, and we're both covered in grease, sitting shotgun in my dad's pickup truck, and we're both asleep. It's kind of it was kind of like a Saturday tradition for my dad to pack up me and my brother, go down to the family business, and we were just keeping the machines lubricated. So I got an early introduction to how to change a tube of grease. And I did that as a teenager. Did a lot of like oil changes and lubrication tasks in a family business. Became an equipment operator through college, and then I got even heavier into the lubrication space after education. I worked for Mobil for their lubrication and specialties company. So I was an engineer with Mobil, and essentially the goal was the same as it had been since I was a kid. You know, we're working hard to keep the machinery healthy and producing and profitable, right? So that's me. That's kind of my professional journey. And then after Mobil, I'm still in the lubrication space, but like I mentioned, with Redlist, we're a software company that has the same goals as we all do as we work in this space of lubrication. So.
Yeah. And so then in terms of industries that you guys tend to service, is it pretty broad? It's kind of everything, or are you guys focused on a particular niche?
Yeah, I would say it's fairly broad. I would say we are focused in heavy industries. So to us, that means like mining companies, manufacturing companies, metals producers, cement. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, but broad across heavy industry. We're not quite as focused on. Essentially, it's the folks whose equipment is the lifeblood of their revenue stream, right? So you might have like a facility that needs preventative maintenance done on it as well, but you can make as much money in a soccer stadium with an old facility that is kind of crumbling as you can with a new facility. So we're more focused on the heavy industrial side, folks that are, their revenue is dependent on the assets being healthy. So
yeah, awesome. Well, I mean, obviously we share a lot in common. I didn't actually realize that you were a mobile engineer, so we do have that in common as well.
Yeah.
Mainly what I wanted to talk to you guys about today was, came to my attention that you guys had done a survey of your customer base. And like you said, because you cover a pretty wide range of industries, I thought that would be interesting to talk about, because it feels like industry and manufacturing is going through a lot of changes. I mean, I know everyone is kind of post-COVID, but in particular, there's a lot of discussion about labor shortages and, let's say, for example, the reshoring effort. Infrastructure bills, obviously in the US, but that's not just confined to the US. I think that's a reasonably common trend around the world, where people are looking at their manufacturing and bases and saying, well, maybe we shouldn't have outsourced all of that. Maybe we should bring some home. And there's obviously some challenges that go along with that. So I'm really interested to hear, in some ways, some of the feedback that is coming direct from the maintenance teams, the maintenance supervisors, things like that, because I think that'll really help our listeners understand some of the challenges that are out there. They might be,
Right.
and in some cases, some of our listeners might have the same challenges, but think that they're alone in it. And it'd be nice for them to feel like, oh, hang on, everyone is facing the same sort of dilemma.
Sure.
So maybe just to start, what prompted you guys to do this survey and get that feedback from your customer base?
Sure. Yeah, so I guess probably a little more detail about software than you want to know is there's a methodology called continuous discovery. Good software companies are not just building features and delivering them to their customers, right? There's kind of two pieces to building software. There's discovering the problems that your customers care about, and then actually delivering solutions to those. So the survey piece is just part of that continuous discovery process that our product team runs. You're trying to essentially learn, especially when you're in a myriad of broad industries like we are, you're trying to discover common overlapping problems so that your software you can build features that actually helps people's lives get better. So it's just a part of our ongoing process. It's like a mix between your marketing department and your product team trying to find the right things because when you have a good customer base, it's a pretty good bet that their problems are a good representation of the market in general. So
Yeah, interesting. Um, Would you mind helping us just understand what are some of the specific questions that you were asking in that survey? Like, what's the kind of information that you were looking for?
I don't have the survey in front of me, but it was essentially just like, hey, tell us what your hot buttons are. What are the things that are related to your maintenance team? What are your biggest problems? Where are some areas that you feel like you're limited, or the kind of the biggest pains? And that's, as you mentioned, that's a shifting answer, a shifting landscape. So that's really what, when you're doing this continuous discovery process, you're trying to do is either identify a problem that somebody has, like a real life problem that you can solve for them, or some desire that they have. It doesn't have to be a problem you're solving. It could be that they want better tasting ice cream or whatever. But for us, we're typically, when you're working with a maintenance team, it's pretty easy to say, hey, tell us what your problems are. And 5 years ago, it might have been that prices were too high on something, or they're trying to reduce cost or healthier equipment. But like you mentioned, right now, the theme of the day is shortages, right? Like that there's a lot of different answers to our kind of that general question of what problems are you facing in the current environment, and we'll dive into that. But there's everybody's feeling the pinch on whether it be their people, their parts, consumables, budgets. Everybody's feeling a shortage. Just trying to do more with less is essentially kind of the theme of all the responses that we got.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I had an opportunity to read through probably some of the responses. I don't think it was necessarily all of them, but like you said, if there was an overarching theme, it seemed like there was a shortage of everything. Like so
Right.
it felt like it's shortage of people, shortage of parts, shortage of products, shortage of budget, shortage of management support, for what these guys are doing. Even some of the responses were almost heartbreaking in some ways, because people are talking about the psychological burden that it's placing on them
Right.
as well. So
Yeah.
I'd like to address maybe some of those in particular. Um, Maybe if we start with labor, right? Because this is kind of I mean, you guys, I think, are officially in a recession, and Australia's headed that way
Yeah.
at the moment.
Right.
A lot of the world is kind of in a bit of a downturn, but this is a weird downturn where in a lot of the industries that you and I are exposed to, they can't hire enough people.
Right.
So it's kind of
It's
like
crazy.
it's not. I mean, I suspect there is some displacement of workers. Let's say, for example, in tech industry, you hear a lot of the big tech companies laying off people, but it's not. It's sort of like
Right.
a white collar recession versus a blue collar recession, right?
Right.
So it feels like the deck is a bit stacked against a lot of industries. So we always
Sure.
had this overarching thing where demographics were kind of against us, because it felt like we had an overhang of very experienced people who are about to sort of age out of the workforce. Don't have that many young people coming through. Um, Maybe some of these businesses are seen as being less attractive to
Yeah, yeah.
younger people or the younger generations and stuff as well.
I think
So
that's a
is it?
big I think that's a big point that people don't you don't talk about as much, right? We talk about the aging labor force, but also just the shift in the economy as well, right? Like just 15 years ago when I was working in the oil and gas space, working for Mobil, the biggest companies in the world were all, the big oil companies.
Mm,
And just in that short time, like the bigger companies are all tech companies. And I think there is a big perception where people think, the sexy place to go work is Amazon or Apple or whatever. And you kind of have this shift away from where people, 20, 30 years ago, it was like you needed to be able to work a piece of equipment or work with your hands or with tools. And yes, you might need to be able to turn on a computer and enter some data every once in a while. Now it's kind of like the opposite, right? It's like you need to be able to live and work in a computer, and then every once in a while you might have to go turn on a piece of equipment and do something with it, right? And
yeah.
and so it's not just that, the labor force is getting older, it's also that it's shifting where people, like, there's, I think, like you said, this perceived, at least for young people coming out of college, it's like I want to work in tech or with tech. And so I think that's another big challenge that the companies are facing is just the perception of what it's like to work in those businesses. So
Yeah, like it almost seems like it's the prerogative of older generations to kind of dump on younger generations, right? And say, they're not as good as us, or the assumption is, oh, they all want to be TikTok creators and they all want to
yeah,
go and work at
right,
Google and have free
right,
lunches and all that kind of stuff. But for all those broad generalizations, there is an element of truth to
for sure.
the
Yeah,
general manufacturing and mining and oil and gas being less attractive, propositions than they probably were in the
sure.
past, which is
Right.
obviously making it a bit harder. So, do you see in this labor market or in the industries that you work with, do you see any sort of creative solutions that people are kind of trying to come up with uh, to close that gap, either in hiring, retention, or even like
Yeah,
innovative ways, whether it's using
sure.
software
Yeah, yeah.
or part-time labor? How are they bridging that gap?
Right. So a couple thoughts there. First of all, I'm not like a labor expert, or I'm not like the guy to ask like how to solve this problem for these companies. But as I work with them as customers and, helping them, navigate their software problems, the things that they're trying to do with applications, I do see a lot of young people that are working for them. And I think most of them are surprised at like how a manufacturer or a mining company or whoever it is, they're all tech companies as well, right? And some of them are just barely like starting to ride the wave. And so it's this really exciting time where, say you're like a new engineer in mining or in manufacturing, and you show up and you think you're hiring onto some old, kind of, this is the way it's been. These guys have been in business for 100 years type business, but they're all just like barely getting on the technology wave. So I think it's a complete misconception from whatever you call the generation that that they're not tech companies, because everybody literally is. When we sell our software, it's rarely like, hey, are you guys thinking about doing these types of things, or have you considered this? It's a much different conversation. It's more like, when are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? Are you building these apps yourself, or which solution are you choosing, right? So I think that's one thing, like you mentioned. I'm sure the recruiters for these businesses are helping to show the young people, like, look, we are tech companies. We're completely revolutionizing the way we do business. And I think that's exciting. And really, all it takes is for a person to kind of duck their head into the business for a minute and see all the fun things that they're developing and building. So I don't think it's as big of a problem as a lot of people perceive it to be, as long as you can kind of get the people in the door and show them like what initiatives you're working on. Um, I do think you have to figure out how to do more with less, and certainly see a lot. I mean, that's one of the primary problems that we try to solve with our software and a lot of our competitors and apps in general, right, is to make the workforce more capable, and there should be less work to do because you're kind of documenting your work as you perform it. So I think software and technology does, if the labor force does shrink, as these baby boomers retire, they should be able to accomplish more with less, with better tools. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, one of the things that always it never ceases to surprise me, I guess is how I would put it, is going into some of these more modern manufacturing facilities and
yeah,
seeing the level of automation, like how few people in some cases there are on the shop floor
right,
versus how much is being produced, how many
totally.
widgets or whatever are coming out the back end.
It's crazy.
It's kind of astonishing, right? That
Yeah,
how much production can happen with so few people. But like you said,
right.
that speaks to automation and software and all the rest of it. Um, all right. So the second maybe overarching shortage, if you
Yeah,
like, seemed to be shortage of things. So shortage of primarily a lot of people complaining about shortage of spare parts.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
Again, in your particular customer base, which is pretty broad, how are you seeing them kind of rise to that challenge?
Yeah. So that one has been interesting. Like, we have relationships with a lot of suppliers and a lot of customers, and they've all been very open about the challenges. Like you mentioned, it seems like it's been one after another, whether it was lockdowns or, some cargo ship stuck in a canal somewhere that affects all of us. It's been crazy kind of how many things have stacked up just to make it like feels like the perfect storm. And so I think what a lot of companies have had to do is kind of broaden their supply base. Most folks have been, at least in my short career, what I've noticed is a lot of people have tried to consolidate suppliers, right? It's like it's a lot easier for purchasing, it's just smoother. And then this came along, and they're like, oh, this is the downside of consolidating suppliers. And with the global economy that we have, it feels like this is the first time we've had this hiccup. So I've seen a lot of people broaden their supply chain quite a bit, which I'm sure is pushing more pain back onto like the purchasing teams. But that's been one thing. And then for us, I think one place where we always try to help people, our customer base, is to realize that and this is probably getting into the weeds a little, maybe a little more than you do want to about software, but I guess maybe I'll just tell some stories. Like it seems like 9 out of 10 times that we go and set up a facility, say for like a preventative maintenance schedule, they have this like hypothetical or ideal plan, right? It's like we're going to take care of our gearboxes in this certain way, and we're going to take care of our hydraulic systems in this certain way. And they have a set of products that they buy, and they have like these routine frequencies that they go and maintain these pieces of equipment. And we all know that there's like different classes of parts. You could buy an expensive part that's supposed to last longer, a cheap part that lasts a little less longer. But what we're trying to help people realize, like especially through software, is like, look, labor and parts are kind of becoming your bottleneck, and you should really like listen to your supplier that's been telling you this for decades, that you can actually save money, you can actually reduce the workload and make the equipment healthier by doing less, right? Just buy my highest value, most technologically performant product, and you don't have to change your hydraulic system every year. You can do it every 10 years, right? There's places you can get like a 10x reduction in the amount of work that you need to do. And yes, the product costs more, but it's not 10 times more, right? So there's cost savings there. There's so much meat on the bone. What I was trying to say is 9 times out of 10, I go into a facility and people are worried about labor, they're worried about parts, but they're not even paying attention to what kinds of parts, what classes of parts they're buying. I'm like, guys, you're worried about labor and you're changing your gearbox oil like every year, and you buy this. I'm not going to name any particular products, but you buy you buy this product. Like, you have so many vendors that are there to just send them this file and show them what you're buying and say, look, I have a workload of, with my PM program, I got to do 80 hours of labor a week to stay on top of it, and I've only got 20 hours of capacity. Help me go from 80 to 20. And like, the suppliers would be all over that, right? They'd be like, oh, you just got to switch to this product, right? But it's like, this is almost like a forced function that suppliers have been begging their customers to pay attention to for decades. And finally people are like forced into realizing, oh, how do I do this? But the crazy thing is, I don't see it happening as fast as I would expect. I don't see like the customer leaning on the supplier that they really should to solve that problem.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation, because I think in some of the sites that I've been to recently, you would think that there's an opportunity to sort of kill two birds with one stone. Like you said, if just taking the example of longer oil changes,
Right.
you have to buy less product, which your suppliers are short of,
Yep.
and then you have to use less labor, which you are also short of. So
Right.
there's an opportunity to solve two problems with
Right.
one solution, and yet that's generally not the option that people take. I see a
Yeah.
lot of people out there, rather than, for example, upgrading um, whatever it is, gears, hydraulic packs, or whatever, they spend a lot of time maybe taking some of the old parts and then trying to remachine them so that they can put them back on the spare parts shelf or something like that, right? That's the option that
Yeah.
they've taken
Right.
versus, like you said, an opportunity to upgrade. So yeah, divergent paths maybe
Yeah,
to a
it's
single problem.
right. It's obviously, price tag, initial investment, all that stuff comes into it. So it's
Yeah,
not as simple as it sounds. But from the software side, sometimes it's a little bit like, you feel like it's spelled out so plainly. Like, guys, there's just call this guy, he'll solve your problems. And we're in an interesting position, because we're a software company, but we've got a few people with like industry experience that know equipment, know lubrication, myself being one of the group. But just from a from an indemnity position, we don't go out and like make recommendations. We're not a part supplier or a lubrication supplier. So we can see like the gaps and the missing points, but I can't tell them, look, you just need to switch that product from product A to product B, and all like this thing would just run like I basically, the best I can do is say, hey, call whoever sells you this product and get them to agree that you should do this.
yeah.
So, because
Yeah.
we make them switch it. We're not the supplier, so we can't do that. But
Well,
it's
you sort of tapped into one of the other shortage themes. So when you said that, yeah, I mean, these things do cost capital, so it's not necessarily a matter of flicking the switch and then buying, the more premium product or anything like that. Because one of the other themes that came out was tightening maintenance budgets,
right.
right? So not only are people short on parts and labor,
Yeah.
but they also can't spend any money.
Right.
Now, that seems a little bit counterintuitive when you see a lot of companies running, record profits and all this kind of stuff
Sure.
because of the shortages that we're talking about. However, let's put that aside, because that's maybe a little bit more business, political, whatever. But where I thought it would be an interesting place to go with this is that you probably see different levels of alignment across organizations that you go into, right? So there'll
Yeah.
be some where maintenance is very much viewed as the bad guy versus
Yeah.
operations. They're the ones who they spend all the money and they're just wasting, versus, let's say, for example, businesses that are set up more like asset management organizations, or they
Right.
have reliability teams where that money is seen more as an investment.
Yeah.
So are you seeing, with all these shortages, are you seeing businesses try to make that transition from a maintenance focus to a reliability focus to an asset management focus, or are people just kind of in their own lane and just plowing plowing
Yeah.
along?
No, I think we're definitely seeing that. And I think the movement was starting long before we ever started doing this, and before this crisis came into play. But I think the shortages has pushed it along, and I think people are approaching it in the right way. There's definitely folks that are doing what you described, where they kind of have tunnel vision, and it's just a, everybody's just looking at cost, and they're not looking at reliability centered programs, or that's really one of the what you mentioned about the silo between operations and maintenance is like one of the main reasons why I started Redlist, because as I was working with my family's business, there was always this tug of war between the dispatchers in operation versus the maintenance guys, right? And it's like, who needed the asset more? And when you could just get them on the same page and just like kind of break down the silo and let the data flow between the two departments, and operations could see that, hey, if we actually shut this thing down, once a quarter and do what we're supposed to do to it, it never breaks down in the field and we don't have these astronomical expenses. And then likewise, obviously the maintenance team needs to see kind of like the production goals and numbers that really they're kind of subservient, that they're trying to run the business outcomes as well. So that's really what I think any organization should be striving to do. At a minimum, just at least break down those silos so that there's data that's being shared between maintenance and operations. And I think one thing I've noticed just in running our business is like as soon as you're aware of a KPI or some metric or some goal being important, your brain just like does this thing where it starts mattering to you, and it influences your decisions. And even though you don't think you've made any major changes to start helping improve that KPI, you just naturally start to kind of funnel towards that goal. So I think it's a huge thing that companies should be looking to do in sharing data across those departments. And like your question, going back to your question, are people doing it at a faster pace than they were before COVID? I'm not sure, but most of the folks that we're selling to and that we're working with are very cross-functional, and they're all working towards some sort of goal like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's encouraging to hear. Maybe one last kind of question that's a bit more lubricants focused,
Sure.
for the sake of this channel. Um, Fortunately, you have some background in this business. Um, Everyone would be familiar. Base oil supply was very tight at the beginning of COVID. Now it's more of kind of concerns around additives on specific engine oils and gear oils mostly. Um, what's your experience in the field? Are you seeing any easing of that? Is it getting worse? How are teams coping with it?
Yeah. I haven't seen it easing up at all, but um, I guess the best pulse I have is probably with folks that I know on the supply side, and most of them that I talk to feel express that they feel like it's easing up, which is encouraging. Um, some of the folks in supply that mentioned that they have like more storage than some of the other suppliers have mentioned that recently it seemed to have even shifted a little bit faster to their reserves, I guess, that they're using them up because their competitors can't or whatever. But from what I hear on the supply side, it's should be easing up. In the field, I haven't heard of any, that things are getting easier, or that they've been able to go back to just like single source of suppliers, or they're not finding creative ways to you know, using gear oils in creative ways, or there's a lot of things that I've heard out there that I didn't know you could do. I don't have enough experience I guess I don't have enough. I haven't been through enough war stories to realize where you can get creative with uh, lubricants or parts. But I've heard some funny stories. So
Yeah, right. Actually, one thing I did neglect to mention was that there was also um, that kind of psychological aspect to
yeah,
this, right, as well. That the shortage of everything, whether it's labor, parts, maintenance budget, even support, from upper management, is trickling down and having a really negative impact on a lot of frontline workers.
Right.
So did you see that? I mean, how strongly did you see that in the results of the survey would be maybe the first question. And I mean, how is your base going?
I mean, I don't know if we asked that explicitly in the survey, but it felt like you could almost read the stress in some of the responses, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm just thinking of my own personal life and the last 10 customer sites I've been on. Like, it feels like we're all maybe carrying a little more stress than usual. So I think there's a huge psychological component to this, and not to go into too many other tangents. I'm not an expert in psychology or anything like that either. But I think stress is good for us. One of the books that I've read recently is that mentions that if you believe stress can be a positive influence in your life, it will affect you positively. And if you believe it's breaking you down, then it'll break you down. So it is kind of what you make of it. I think one important thing, though, is that you kind of have a way to get a break from it. So it's hard in business when, like you said, when there's a shortage of everything and there's not really like any reprieve from the pressure. You're almost like relying on just your personal life to be this de-stressor. So I don't have the perfect answer for it, but I do see our customers and all the way from the managers down to the guys on the floor are a little more stressed. I see it in my own business. We're all worried about, the same things that our customers are, just kind of different ways of looking at those problems.
Yeah. And I guess if there is any upper management that happens to be listening to this, just be aware of the downstream effects of some of the decisions. There are people out there that are doing it reasonably tough.
Right.
All right. Well, Tal, it was really nice to kind of hear. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of it's bad news, but it has been really nice to hear a lot of those results that are coming direct from these maintenance teams. I think it's always really good to get that feedback so that we can better understand how industry's going and where it's headed as well. So, thanks very much for sharing all that information. I really appreciate your time as well. Now, for anyone who sort of wants to check it out, I'll leave a link to the Redlist website. They have some really good tools for kind of like CMMS, but also where I kind of learned about them was in managing lube routes and optimizing lube routing as well. And they've got some really good tools for that. So I'd encourage people to go and have a look because, as has been talked about on this podcast before, a lot of the time lube routing does not really fit in with your CMMS very well. And so these guys have come up with a solution for that. So that's why I think it's really worth checking out. But Tal, thanks very much for your time and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thank you, Rafe. We, again, really appreciate being on.